Hey, what's up? This is Mr. Ippolito, and today we're going to go over Thomas Jefferson's 1801 inaugural address. Now, the first page here is background knowledge. All of the answers you're going to get right from the reading over here on the left-hand side. We'll go through that part quickly. So, number one, what position did Thomas Jefferson have in Washington's cabinet? The answer is Secretary of State. Number two, who was John Adams' vice president? Well, it was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson served as our second vice president of the United States. Number three, what political party did Thomas Jefferson belong to? That was the Democratic Republican Party. Number four, who helped decide the election of 1800? If you watch the musical Hamilton, or if you read this, you know that it was Alexander Hamilton who finally gave his support. Rather than giving it to his longtime friend Aaron Burr, he ended up giving it to his longtime rival Thomas Jefferson, because he said that while Aaron Burr was friendly and nice and talk less, smile more, Thomas Jefferson actually stood for things. He actually had opinions on important issues. Number five, who was Thomas Jefferson's vice president? That was Aaron Burr. Number six, what type of government did Jefferson oppose? So Jefferson is going to oppose, we're going to look in the reading here. This is where we can slow it down a little bit. He opposed a government where the United States government, right, the central government had too much power. That would be like a federalist form of government with a capital F, federalist, because he was opposed to the Federalist Party. Really what he wanted was more of a Republican party, a Republican government, and he was the leader, of course, of the Republican Party. So that's Republican with a capital R, Republican Party. That was he was the leader of Republicans, or the Democratic Republicans, but a Republican form of government with a little r, right? So that type of Republican government is based on the Roman Republic, the idea where the people have a voice in who makes their laws and who governs them. So that is that's a Republican form of government. We would refer to that today either as a Republican form of government, or we would just refer to that as democracy today. That form of government where people have more of a voice, right? Regular, ordinary people. Number seven, how did Jefferson arrive to his first inauguration? If you look at the story here, it talks about how he was he wanted to be very plain and simple, a man of the people, and so he walked to his inauguration as opposed to riding in a formal carriage as though he were royalty. He really wanted to be that man of the people. And number eight, why do you think Jefferson took off his powdered wig as president? Again, I think it's to support that idea of him being the common man, right? A president for the common man. What year did Jefferson die in? 1826. And then what was unique about the day he died? We've talked about this before, because it was the exact same day, the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, not the signing. This is I took this assignment from another teacher. Teachers do this frequently, by the way. And so I was correcting whichever the teacher was who made this assignment originally corrected it. It's the official adoption of the Declaration. The signing, as you know, happened later, sometime in August. Anyway, and then the other thing that was unique about that was the fact that he and John Adams died on the same day. Okay, now this side is way more important, and we're going to take some time now to kind of break down. I'm not going to answer the questions for you, but you will be able to answer the questions based on my breakdown of each one of these excerpts from Thomas Jefferson's 1801 inaugural address. To give you a little bit of context, Thomas Jefferson served 2 terms as president. He was elected in 1800 and elected again in 1804. But this speech is a super important speech. It's specifically mentioned in the 8th grade social studies standards for California. The reason why is because this is a very pivotal moment in American history. George Washington, for all intents and purposes, was a Federalist. Even though he did not declare officially a political party, he was a Federalist. John Adams, of course, was a Federalist. So for 12 years, you've had rule by the Federalist Party, basically, right? And so we are now transitioning, for the first time ever in the history of the United States, we're transitioning from one group, from one party, to another political group, another political party in America. Now, if you look at the history of Europe, you look at the history you look at world history going way, way back, whenever you have power that is held by one group, one family, one dynasty, right? Going back to ancient China, medieval China, one party, and then you switch from one family, group, party to another. Oftentimes, that happens as a result of war, as a result of violence, as a result of murder, as a result of, like, upheaval in society. But in this particular case, we're seeing here in the United States in this new experiment, can we peacefully transfer power from one party, one group to another without there being bloodshed? And this is the test right here, the election of 1800 and that transition of power on March 4th, 1801. This is that moment that Thomas Jefferson is capturing. So the first excerpt from his 1801 inaugural address. During the contest of opinion through which we have passed, the animation of discussions and of exertions has sometimes worn an aspect. So he's basically saying, in this election of 1800, we have been very animated and we have been exerted, right? Like we've been spending a lot of energy kind of bashing each other, basically. John Adams was politically kind of not really, he wasn't really taken seriously by the end of his tenure. And so it started off as Federalists bashing Democratic Republicans and Democratic Republicans bashing Federalists. And now it kind of ends with this bashing of Democratic Republican versus Democratic Republican, right? There's just been a lot of partisan, and of course, Aaron Burr used to be a Federalist, switched parties just because it was convenient for him. So there's been a lot of political bashing. This contest of opinion, the election of 1800s, sometimes worn an aspect which might impose on strangers unused to think freely and to speak and to write what they think. So there's been a lot of very open talk and criticism of leaders, which you don't often see in other countries, but we do it freely here in the United States. But this being now decided by the voice of the nation, announced according to the rules of the Constitution, all will, of course, arrange themselves under the will of the law and unite in common efforts for the common good. So what he's saying is, you know what, here in the United States, this is what we do. We bash each other. We talk smack about each other. We have very fierce political rivalries, but at the end of the day, there should be what we call a peaceful transfer of power, peaceful transition of power. In other words, according to the rules of the Constitution, everything's going to work out okay because we played by the rules. We played by the rules, and now there's a peaceful transfer of power. There have been 2 elections in American history where there was not a peaceful transfer of power following an election. The first was 1860. That was when Abraham Lincoln was elected. And then, of course, the Civil War broke out. The second time in American history where there has not been a peaceful transfer of power was the 2020 election, right? Where Joe Biden was elected president of the United States according to the rules of the Constitution. All 50 states certified their electors, and it was supposed to be a peaceful transfer of power. And yet there were some supporters of President Donald Trump who did not want it to be peaceful. And on the day that Congress was set to certify the electoral vote count on January 6, 2021, that's when there was violence at the Capitol. So for the most part, there has been a peaceful transfer of power, except for 2 times in our history. So you can go ahead now that I have explained that excerpt, you can go ahead and answer questions 1 and questions 2. And some of those are your opinion based on the text, right? You make a claim and you make that claim based on evidence. Let's move on to excerpt 2. All, too, will bear in mind this sacred principle that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. So here he's saying, okay, so we've now taken the majority of government. By we, he means his political party, the Democratic Republicans, also known as the Jeffersonian Republicans, also known as the Republicans. He's saying we just took power. We are the majority. However, that does not mean that we should have the right or the power to dispossess, to take away the rights of the minority. In other words, the Federalists they shouldn't be punished. Their rights should not be taken away just because they are currently in the minority. The reason why I think he's mentioning this is because in the previous presidency, right, during the presidency of John Adams, that previous 4 years, the Federalists who had power, who had the presidency and who controlled Congress, they were trying to take away freedom of speech, right? And of course, my lights went out in my classroom, but I'm going to keep going. So they passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, right, where they were trying to limit the influence of foreigners, particularly those from France, in American politics by making the time period longer to become a citizen. And they also were limiting criticism, freedom of speech. I'm going to go turn these lights back on in just a moment, against their rivals, the Democratic Republicans. And so I think he's saying this not just to say, hey, we should do this because it's the right thing to do, but at some point his party may be out of power and the other party might be the majority again. And so he's just saying no one in our country should take away anyone's rights just because they are in the majority. I'm going to pause really quickly, turn the lights back on, I'll be right back. And we're back with excerpt 3 and the lights back on. But every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. This is Thomas Jefferson now bringing the country together, bringing together Federalists and Democratic Republicans. We have called by different names brethren of the same principle. In other words, just because we have a difference of opinion, just because we kind of bash each other, it does not mean that we are not still all Americans. We still believe in the same principles of the Constitution, of democracy, of a Republican, small r, Republican form of government. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. Can't we all just get along? If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated, where reason is left free to combat it. In other words, you know what? If there are those of you who are insurrectionists, if there are those of you who wish to tear apart this country, you know what? Let's let them speak. Let them speak as a monument of the safety with which error of opinion, I love this, error of opinion, they're wrong, right? Their opinion is wrong, but we're going to tolerate it because reason is left free to combat it. In other words, the best way to combat free speech, if that person is talking like an idiot and they are saying things that are clearly not true, or they have an error of opinion, even if they just oppose what you believe, then the best way to combat free speech is with your own free speech, right? That's the best way to fight against their negative speech or their speech that you believe is wrong, is for you to speak the truth, right? And so just kind of affirming those principles of freedom of speech in the United States. Okay, next excerpt, going up to the top of the left column here. Excerpt 4, sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted with the government of others? Or have we found angels in the form of kings to govern him? Let history answer this question. I think what this means, some historians interpret this in a different way. I think the way you can interpret this is simply this. You know what? There are some people who are like, well, you can't trust a Republican, little r, Republican form of, you can't trust democracy. You can't trust people to govern themselves, to govern others, because they can't even govern themselves. Okay, well, if that's the case, have we found angels in the form of kings? In other words, is monarchy really better, right? You're criticizing democracy. You're saying that people cannot rule other people. People cannot rule themselves. Would a monarchy actually be better? And of course, let history answer this question, and I believe I know Thomas Jefferson's response to this, which is no, democracy, republicanism, small r, democracy, democratic, small d form of government is the best type of government where people govern themselves. Excerpt number 5, still one more thing more, fellow citizens. This is Thomas Jefferson now talking about his desire for small and limited government. A wise and frugal government, frugal meaning a government that doesn't spend lots of money. That's a frugal government. Which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, and this is necessary to close the circle of our felicities. Now, here's a couple things that are interesting. First of all, he's saying government should be small and limited, wise and frugal. Let's not spend a lot of money. Let's just let people do their thing, right? Let's not restrain. We should restrain men from injuring one another. That's what government should do, right? The government should protect people, make sure that they're not killing each other, but shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement. In other words, as long as government is protecting, making sure that we're not killing each other, otherwise just let people do their thing. And this is interesting. And shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. Now, the reason why I think this is interesting is because he talks about this. He's talking about taxation, right? He's talking about he wants to limit. And of course, you're going to watch the crash course Thomas Jefferson video if you have not already. And that's John Green is also going to talk about how Thomas Jefferson wanted to lower taxes. Particularly, he repealed the tax that Alexander Hamilton put in place, the whiskey tax, right? So he hated taxation. He wanted taxation to be as low as possible. And he's saying, shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. So, and this is a phrase from the Bible. Thomas Jefferson has used this. Abraham Lincoln will use this as well. But interesting that he uses this phrase, shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned, because he's using this as a way to justify lower taxation. Abraham Lincoln uses this language from the Bible as a way to talk about how we should limit slavery, right? Because slavery is essentially taking from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. When those enslaved people are working, toiling, laboring, and then you steal their labor from them, you steal the fruits of their labor, the bread of their labor, that is unacceptable in the words of Abraham Lincoln. So interesting that a slave owner, Thomas Jefferson, uses this biblical phrase, but in a different context to talk about taxation. And then finally, I love that word felicity, which means happiness. We saw that in George Washington's writing, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison's writing on behalf of George Washington, felicity, which of course means happiness. Okay, excerpt number 6. Let us then with courage and confidence pursue our own federal and republican principles, right? He's saying, you know what? We can espouse both the beliefs of the Federalist Party and my Republican Party, our attachment to union and representative government. We can balance this. Kindly separated by nature and a wide ocean from the exterminating havoc of one quarter of the globe. The exterminating havoc of one quarter of the globe is the wars in Europe, by the way. He's saying, you know what, this Atlantic Ocean, we are kindly separated by nature and a wide ocean from all of the chaos and nonsense that's happening in Europe. Too high-minded to endure the degradations of the others. I think he's quoting Taylor Swift, or perhaps Taylor Swift was thinking of Thomas Jefferson, and the hater's going to hate. He's going to shake it off. He's not going to worry about what Europe might be saying. He wants us to do our thing as Americans, pursuing union and representative government, pursuing federal and republican principles, and we're not going to let anybody else try to influence or sway that. Okay. And that is it. So once again, I didn't answer the questions for you, but hopefully by explaining those excerpts to you, if you did not understand those excerpts, you have a better understanding of what those are, so you can better answer these questions, and so you can better understand the importance and significance of Thomas Jefferson's 1801 inaugural address. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.